but the Germans as well. They had a cinema where they showed French films subtitled into German, which was pretty revolutionary in the 60s already. And they created a public fair, Deutsch-Französisches Volksfest, we say. So the people from Berlin can meet the soldiers from France. It was a very revolutionary thing, and even the Americans and the English copied it as well. Another example of French cultural diplomacy was that they had 4 cultural centers only in Berlin. They even had one in the east of Berlin, in the ex-DDR, which was the only Allied force they had that had a eastern a cultural institute in the former eastern side of Berlin. So today we have quite a different approach as well to culture. We need culture to bring together the young people. For instance, the Centre Français de Berlin, we organize all the youth exchanges for Berlin and Paris. They have a partnership, they're both capitals. Next year is the 25th anniversary. And for instance, we organize a breakdance hip-hop festival between both cities, where we had this year more than 2,000 visitors. And we use subculture or young culture to bring both youth from Paris and Berlin, but from France and Germany in general, together. And I think this is one of the great successes as well. Talking about Germany and France, we have politics, we have economics, but we have a lot of cultural and youth exchanges, which is I think unique in the world.
Thank you very much for your interventions. These were really fascinating. So now it's time for the audience. If you have any question, please, it's time to enter the dialogue.
Yes, I'm Erna Hennico from Luxembourg, and I want to present to the gentleman the Tri-National Cultural Institute, France and Luxembourg and Germany in Luxembourg, Centre Pierre Werner. It was created in 2003 when there were talks that the Goethe Institute would move away from Luxembourg, and the Centre Culturel had problems with its locations. And so we created a new form of cooperation on the cultural field. As you noticed, the message did not come, neither to Berlin nor to French diplomacy. And I dare say that is one of the problems of international cooperation between member states. The cultural ministers are taking initiatives, the ministers of foreign affairs are taking initiatives, but sometimes the ministers of foreign affairs and the ministries are not aware what is going on in the ministries for culture. Mm-hmm. And that creates a lot of technical problems in Europe. But I just want to mention and to invite you to come to Luxembourg and to see what it's like. The Centre Pierre Werner, named after our former Prime Minister and very important European.
Does anyone else have an intervention?
Hello, I'm Tatiana from Vienna. I have an initiative with diverse communities to initiate also networking between cultures and diverse groups. So my question is, to what topics are you meeting? What is exchanged? Or did you analyze the texts of hip-hop songs? What are the actual questions of the young people by exchanging of the dance events?
Well, topics of exchanges is very large. Exchange can be music, theater, circus, apprenticeship. It can be, for instance, talking about the hip-hop culture. Of course, the texts, because a lot of young people in school, they're not very interested by the French language. When they listen to hip-hop, they think it's very cool, and then they learn French. We have Often we have the cases.
That's right.
The French hip hop culture is very big.
Right. Last year, we had a hip hop very well-known man in Berlin, Grand Corps Malade, and we organized in German schools in Neukölln with classes and with a German hip hop so slammer. We organize slam classes, and in French and in German, and after all the scholars has been invited to the concert. 700 people have been invited to the concert, and it was a huge success.
Yeah, and it's the
Excuse me,
same.
but it was a good.
Exactly, we supported the project as well, and so it's.
What is the actual topic behind? I mean, dance, but what focus?
Well,
What
a
is-
lot of, especially in Germany, but in France as well, a lot of, for the young people, especially coming with migrant history, they talk about the identity, about where do I come from, really, because here I consider myself as a Turkish person, and in France they consider me as a German one. So there's a lot of confusion, and the same for the French coming over to Germany. And identity is a big subject, immigration, but it can be as well everything that the young person really is concerned about. I mean, pleasure, whatever.
We are beginning a series of debates with the Bertelsmann Stiftung. The foundation Bertelsmann is a very important foundation in Germany. We are beginning, we began last week in München, a series of 20 debates on federal level in 20 towns on 1.5 years about the topic growth and welfare. And I can't say it's specific for youth, but we are organizing that debate with universities. So the most of the people who will be there are young people, I would say students. And this debate between two debates, the conversation, the discussion will continue on the internet through a forum on a special website. You can find all that on institutfrançais.de. I make some advertising. No, but it's you have a good question, because it's not only the point to say we want to last year we had contacts with 1 million Germans. In all the fields, arts, school, linguistic field, university. It was, and not through the internet. Through the internet, we had 1 million visits on our website in 1 year, where it's increasing, and but we had contact with 1 million people, and from these 1 million people, we can say that were more or less 2/3 young people. But you're right, you don't. It depends on the how can you say? Can I say that? The topics we discuss depends on the target. For example, when we make exchanges of in the music, we can use hip hop, for example, but we make exchanges in the theater too, or we have an action in the cinema too, in the movies, and so on. So it's very there is not one field, one topic field, if I can say, where we act, but a lot. You need a microphone.
It is a very good example and very important to mention that exchanging by hip-hop dance to learn language, which is very important and very problematic in the United Europe. So I think it's a good model to present and also to focus and to mention. So thank you.
You're absolutely right. But we used to something that doesn't exist in Germany and that exists very much in France. It's comics. the Germans don't have very much comics, and especially not for children. And in France, we have a lot of comics. It's an old Belgian tradition.
It's a big comic culture.
Yeah, yes, but Belgium is our... and it's an American tradition too. And for the language, it's a very good vector too. It's very, very interesting too. But you're right, hip-hop is very interesting for the language. Persepolis, yes, for Marjane Satrapi, yes.
I just have to dive in.
Yeah.
I just have to dive in. That's part of the conversation. I don't want to cut you or anything. Just if anyone else in the audience want to intervene,
But for,
please raise your hand.
I would
and I'll
like
give you the mic.
to answer the question or the comment of the lady of Luxembourg, because very quickly, because I knew the existence of this of that Centre Culturel, but we have a special. France and Germany has a special fund for interventions, for cultural intervention in third countries. It's not the case of Luxembourg. Luxembourg is not a third country in that way, but it's interesting to see that in a lot of countries. I have examples in Croatia, for example, but there are a lot of other. France and Germany come together and try to develop some cultural actions.
My name is Elvira, I'm from Kazakhstan, and thank you very much for your discussion. And I have a question. How I understood, I hope I correct understood, if not, please correct me. You mentioned that in France the power in cultural sphere is not so centralized. But there is a Ministry of Culture, and the power, in my point of view, it's very much centralized. There is no mechanism of arm's length like in UK, let's say, and the system is well not like in USA. And what can you precise and tell more about what do you mean by not centralized power?
I don't say it's not centralized. I said it's less centralized than before. The Ministry of Culture in France has a budget by about 4 billion euros. 4 billion euros are in other ministries, especially Ministry for Education. But decentralized communities, authorities have 8 billion euros budget too. So you see, the centralized action of the Ministry for Culture is not so heavy than before, because the part 4 billions in comparison to 16 billions, it's a quarter. It's not. It's important, but it's not so important than in former times. It's the reason I say it's less centralized. I don't say that it is not centralized, which would be a lie.
Hi, I just have one comment really. My name's Amy, I'm from England. What I wanted to say really was that I think there is quite a lot of culture that's brought into France from the immigrants that live there that isn't really recognised, because we talk about France as being very protectionist, and especially in comparison to the US. But for example, in the outskirts of Paris, like, a lot of the immigrant communities have even come up with their own versions of French, so Verlan, where, yeah, so they swap the two sides of the words over and
it's
to
very
create
old.
a new.
Verlan is very old.
The 70s already.
But then even with the new immigration,
the
you have
40s. Yeah.
you have like the Turkish immigrants and
Yeah.
North African immigrants who are coming in, and then also changing their own words from their home countries and giving them a French accent, and then turning them
Right.
very difficult for someone trying to learn French to figure out. But yeah, I just think that should be really sort of recognised, because there is a lot of influence there.
But I mean, Germany and France, even more than Germany, there are multicultural societies like England as well. And today, when you look, for instance, at French music, variété française, you will find every sort of music from the Caribs, from the North Africa, from from Black Africa, and I think it's of course a process over the years, but I think that it is well established already in French culture, the influences from foreign countries. Whereas in Germany, I think we are a bit 10 or 20 years behind that. I mean, this is some personal idea, I think, because you had a different approach. You didn't have really colonies like in France or in England. So, but it's a very interesting subject. I mean, when for instance, when you look, last week I got a call from a group in Paris, a youth center. They wanted to organize a crump dance exchange. Crump for me, I mean, I'm not very old, but I didn't know what it is. And it's a new style of dance coming over from the States to France, and then it goes 12 years later, go over to Germany. So it's, I mean, this is just to say that it's always changing, it's always developing, and I think it's much different than the culture for the young people today than for the 30 or 20 years ago.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we need to bring this to a conclusion, but we're really very grateful to have had you both here and to have had a chance to focus our attention for a while on France, the tremendous experience that France has had with culture diplomacy, and the current practices and strategies of French culture diplomacy. So if you could please join me in expressing our gratitude to Mr. Malinas and Mr. Fangmann. Merci beaucoup. Merci.